What's going on, Washington Commanders fans? This is Josh Taylor here reporting live from Mobile, Alabama. As you can see, I am at the Mobile Convention Center. It is Friday, the day after all three practices, where we got to watch some of the best draft prospects this season here in Mobile on the field, competing against each other before we get ready for the game on Saturday. I have a lot of good nuggets for y'all, just talking about Washington Commander prospects that I've talked to this week. Just getting some intel, making some connections with agents and stuff like that. But then also just getting to know these players and really finding that right fit for those guys. Now, if you remember last year, I was here. I talked to Ben Sennett and I said, look, Ben, you are the exact guy Adam Peters is going to be looking for. We ended up drafting him, and I'm expecting a big season out of Ben this season coming up. So my big goal when I come down here is trying to find those players that fit what we have here in Washington when it comes to culture and really building that roster to get us to the Super Bowl. So I have a ton of notes, if you can't tell here, front and back of this page. So I'm going to try to not make this too long. But nonetheless, guys, hit that subscribe button and then follow me on social media at Josh Taylor FB if you don't already. Like I said, I'm going to go through here and talk about my favorite players from this week. It's a lot. I'm going to try to not make it too long, but then also give y'all a couple nuggets, just talking to some people. Talked to an NFL insider on day 2 of practice and kind of tested the waters on a couple players for Washington that a lot of fans want to be traded. I'll talk about that. And then also talk about one of my favorite players, and this is the guy I am honing in on the rest of this draft season. So I'm going to give y'all pretty much a top to bottom rundown on the players I like, give you a quick few nuggets with a couple guys. But as the draft process really goes through, you can expect a lot of videos when it comes to positions that I'm looking at for Washington, and then breaking down these individual players and really funneling these players down to my final mock draft to where I really feel good about this. So I feel like already I have a pretty good, I don't want to say a full understanding of this draft, but I feel like being here really does help just get a feel of what this draft's going to be like. Every year we kind of have an idea of what to expect. And this has been, pretty universally known. This isn't the best draft by any means. A lot of scouts and pros kind of think you might get 9 or 10 first-round grades on some players here. But then an event like this in the Senior Bowl, you have some day 2 guys that are competing, that look good, that are pushing themselves into that first-round consideration. And we definitely saw that this week. So I'm going to start with the defense, go position by position, and then go through offense and end it with a kicker for the Washington fans that want to hear about that. Got a lot of kicker questions this week. And then once I get to the position, I'll drop my nugget of what I just kind of talked to with the NFL Insider this week. But I want to start out with corners. This is something I'm going to be thinking about the rest of this offseason. Obviously, leading up to free agency, there's some corners I like that I'll talk about coming up. But I'm looking at the draft. If we decide to go that route, who are some guys that Washington might actually be looking at? And to be honest with you, there was about 3 guys here at the Senior Bowl that had really good weeks, but also I feel like they would just be Dan Quinn guys, Adam Peters guys. And it starts with Azariah Thomas out of Florida State. In my opinion, he was the best corner here all week long. He was the name that I was hearing a lot about coming into practice, but I didn't really know too much about him. I haven't really watched his tape yet. But just looking at him, 6'1", 191 when he weighed in here in Mobile, and he allowed just 94 yards in coverage all last season with a pretty bad Florida State team, a team that underperformed all season long. But he was clamping down wide receivers all week. And I will say the quarterback play was not good by any means here in Mobile. It was bad. It was really bad. But when it came down to those one-on-one drills that are very wide receiver friendly, Thomas was the one guy who every single practice, rep after rep, was, displaying really good hands, displaying really good technique, fluidity in his hips and everything, change of direction, things I look for in a corner. Secondly, I will go with Kentucky's Maxwell Harrison, and I think this is a big-time Dan Quinn type of player. I have watched his tape. He's 5'11", 180, so people are going to say he's undersized, but he does not play like it. I know you're going to scream at me because you're like, oh, what about Emmanuel Forbes? They are not the same player. he is very productive. 6 interceptions, 8 pass breakups, and 20 starts at Kentucky. But he's a very lengthy. He's not as small as Forbes. And I will say this, the thing I like about him, he is such a willing tackler in the run game. Missed only 8% of tackles as an outside corner at Kentucky. So you're kind of expecting, oh, he's a smaller guy. He might miss some tackles. He might not be as good in the run game. That is not the case for Maxwell Harrison at all. There was a ton of buzz. Matter of fact, he sat out day 3 of the practice. He was in sweats for the whole practice just because all the buzz that he got from the first 2 days of practice. He came here to do something, and he did it. And another guy that didn't finish out the week was Trey Amos out of Ole Miss, former Alabama corner before he transferred to Ole Miss. Hated to see him go. But he weighed in at 6 foot 195. And this was another guy coming into it that I knew a lot about. And I just said, this is a guy who would play really well. This is the kind of lengthy, just competitive dog at corner that Dan Quinn would love to have. Him and Coach Witt would be a perfect fit. And I'll throw out another extra one that didn't finish the week. Dorian Strong out of Virginia Tech. Another guy that's kind of smaller than I expected, 6 foot 179. But day 1, he was one of my favorite corners to watch. I'll go, you can drop comments, when you're watching the video, if you have any questions of maybe I don't really like doing pro comps, but if you're questioning where I could expect them to go, what round and stuff like that, I haven't really dug deep into all of them just because there's so many players and it's changing throughout the week too. And it'll change before April as well. But if you have any questions, comments, drop that below. I'm definitely planning on, probably going live on Sunday night when I come back, to Texas anyways, and doing a live stream, just answering questions there as well. But if you have anything, please drop them in the comments and I'll try to reply to all of them. But overall, I was impressed by the corners. I knew this wasn't the best wide receiver class coming here to Mobile, and same with quarterbacks, but I really want to see those one-on-one drills, what they look like and how they competed. And like I said, I was impressed. 2 of them didn't even finish the week. I'd be surprised if Thomas plays. I don't think he should. I think a lot of guys are going to pull out of the game for tomorrow, or maybe you're watching this on Saturday and they don't play. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. I've already seen about 3 or 4 guys that aren't on the roster anymore. But those are the corners. Let's go to edge next. This edge class is ridiculous. I have a big sleeper. I have a perfect fit. And then there's 2 guys that really just went crazy this week. I'll start with the 2 that went crazy. Obviously, Marshall's Mike Green, 6'3", 251, kind of smaller arms, kind of undersized to a lot of people. But this is a guy that dominated. When I say dominated, I mean, he went viral on a couple of clips. I posted the one on Twitter of him running over Josh Connolly Jr., who is honestly a first-round offensive tackle. But Mike Green out of Virginia, shout out to Virginia, just went insane this week. And he was one of the guys that pulled out early. But there was some, I don't want to say buzz, but there was some rumors going around yesterday, the last day of practice, when he wasn't there, that there might be some off-the-field issues with Mike Green that haven't been answered yet, or maybe it's something he's had to address this week. I don't know that exactly, but that is some buzz that was going around the last day of practice, is that he might have some off-the-field stuff. So a little concerned about that, but something to keep an eye on. Another person that didn't finish the week, Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. Holy smokes, this guy's huge. 6'5", 281. He doesn't talk a lot, but he does on the field with his pads. This guy was killing guys in one-on-one drills, even 11-on-11s, 7-on-7 drills. It didn't matter. He made his presence known. I loved his get-off. I loved his pass rushing arsenal that he showed here in Mobile. Like I said, another guy that left early. I think Mike Green and Shamar Stewart are top 20 guys. We'll see what happens with Mike Green with the whole off-the-field things. I have no idea what it is, but something to keep an eye on. Stewart, I think he's a lock at top 22. I don't think either of those guys would be there for Washington. That's another question I keep getting a lot too, is Josh, as of today, who do you think, or what position do you think Washington would draft in the first? And I'm not there yet. I'm getting there, but I have a pretty good idea of what not the player, but kind of the thought process going into the draft could be. So I'm going to get to that as well. But like I said, still early in the process. But then also, let me go back up top. My biggest sleeper of this week, and I think he'd be a great fit for this team, is Jared Ivey out of Ole Miss. Once again, this is a guy that I did not have on my watch list going into it, but surprised the heck out of me. Those are the players this week that I love. The ones that I don't know anything about, the ones that I, haven't watched film on yet, don't really know too much about, didn't have a lot of buzz. But then they just come here and they dominate people. And Ivy, in my opinion, 6'5", 283 was my biggest, well, I don't want to say biggest because another guy coming up soon is one of my favorites, but he was one of the biggest sleepers in my opinion here, and I loved watching him practice. And same with his teammate Princely out of Ole Miss on the edge there, 6'4", 264. Princely Amanda Mellon. I mean, this is a guy I did know about. I've done some homework on between him and Nick Scordon, who didn't show up this week. And I liked Princely. I like how he was able to stop the run. He does the spin move a lot. That's like his favorite move. So maybe he showed a few other things here this week, but I was kind of expecting I don't want to say he had a bad week. I think Princely had a good week. Was I expecting more out of him? Sure, like definitely. But still, I thought it was a good week. But one of my favorite players coming into here, not only because he went to Coastal Carolina first and transferred to Michigan, but Josiah Stewart. Shout out to Josiah. Really good guy. If I had to pick one edge out of this group here in Mobile, that would be a Washington Commander. It is Josiah Stewart. A couple reasons why. One, he was a team captain at Michigan. His teammates love him. I'm sure Mikey Samerstill could talk about him for hours. He's a really good guy. 6 foot, 248, might be a little undersized, but the film does not lie. And what I love the most about him is he loves stopping the run. I posted a clip where I interviewed him after practice briefly, and just telling him like, hey man, what's that trigger like, and how are you able to stop the run, compared to, pass rushing, something that Washington struggled with so much this season is just those edge rushers just not stopping those outside runs to save our lives. I think that's something that Washington is focusing on. I think that's something that's well known, especially here. Like I said, just talking to people this week, people think Washington's going to be adding an edge, whether it's a trade or whether it's in the draft. I think that's a lock. And it has to be someone that can stop the run, but also get to the quarterback and be productive. And Josiah Stewart did both of those in his whole career at Coastal and at Michigan as well. But that's my edge class. One guy I will mention, Oluwafemi Oladejo out of UCLA, 6'2", 261. This is a guy that played linebacker his whole career and then transitioned to an edge guy last year, pretty much like the same transition that Abdul Carter had to go through. But he was an edge rusher for one season. He had 4.5 sacks and 14 tackles for loss. I mentioned him on day one because, once again, I knew nothing about this guy, but every single rep, he was the loudest one on the field. He had the most energy. He had crazy speed off the edge. And then also having that background as a linebacker, I asked him, I was like, does that help you when it comes to stopping the run? Does it help you with getting 14 tackles for loss of, gap integrity or knowing when to, stop the run on the way to the quarterback and how to do so? And he said, absolutely. And one nugget with Olu is that his previous linebacker coach was none other than Washington Commanders linebacker coach Ken Norton Jr. Before this past year, he was the coach at UCLA. So he knows him. He knows him well. He's played under Ken Norton Jr. That could be a connection to watch as well. But for a guy that might not have the most experience at edge right now, I liked what I saw. Of course, he can add to his arsenal, but there's a lot of different things you can do with him. I think he'd be a day 3 guy. You can move him around, whether it's on the inside or the outside, whether you want to put him as like an outside linebacker or maybe like passing situations. Scouts were buzzing over Olu. Like I said, 6'2", 261. I told him, I was like, dude, you look like you've been playing edge for a while. Like, even just down to his stance and how comfortable he looked, he was like, I feel like this is where I belong. This is scouts. This is where they're telling me I should be and where I belong. So keep an eye on Olu Wafemi Oladejo out of UCLA. I'm a big fan leaving this week, and he surprised the heck out of me. Like, I didn't know him, and now I do. So those are the ones I really like. Like I said, to come here and really show people who they are. And going into D tackles, well, I don't want to say he's my favorite player, but he might be number 2. He's definitely top 3. Toledo defensive tackle Darius Alexander, 6'3", 304. In my opinion, I think he was the best D tackle here, which is crazy when you have Walter Nolan, when you have Deion Walker, you have those big names here. Darius Alexander out of Toledo had, I don't even want to say just D tackles, but overall, I think he was a top 5 performance here at the Senior Bowl out of every position. He is a freak athlete. He can line up anywhere. They had him in 0 tech. They had him out in 9 tech in certain situations, and he was getting to the quarterback with ease. I watched a little bit of tape of him the other day. I even saw a play where he dropped into coverage and caught an interception from that D tackle spot. I think he was like lined up as like a 3 tech. So just insane stuff. Freak athlete. I think that's a guy that could be a steal, maybe 4th round right now is where I might have a grade on him. Haven't finalized that yet, but I definitely have to take a look at some more of his film. But I loved what I saw out of Darius Alexander. Remember the name. Really good personality as well. He had really good conversations with the Washington Commanders this week. Every player, by the way, meets with the Washington Commanders. Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl, they all meet with Washington. But the question I always ask, what was that interview like? What kind of questions did they ask you? What kind of connection do you have with Washington? What was your impression leaving that interview? Those kind of in-depth, personalized questions, not just like, hey, man, did you meet with Washington this week? The answer is going to be yes. And I'll talk about someone here who is my favorite player this week. That really gave me a definitive, precise, personalized answer of like how those interviews go. Because every team interviews different. I'm like, who was the most, memorable interview you had, or what did Washington ask you to do? Sometimes they're like, hey, they had me draw on boards, they had me do all kinds of stuff. But he had a good connection with them. He said he thought it went well, so don't be surprised on that. Kentucky, Deion Walker, 6'7", 340, just a mammoth of a human being. Showed it this week. There's some questions about what happened to him last year, kind of a drop off last year. I asked him, I was like, you're obviously having to answer these questions with teams. So I'm going to ask you, like, what happened last year? And they said he was struggling with back injuries. He just wasn't the same last year. Now he's feeling healthy, and it showed this week. I thought he had a really good week. But with someone that's 6'7", 340, he's just towering over people. These guards and these centers can kind of get up under his pad level. So I asked him, like, how do you really attack that? And, his length is ridiculous. I mean, just standing next to him, talking to him is insane. But just seeing how he's able to just jab the inside of, these guards and centers where their arms, it's short. They're not tackles. They can't reach Deion Walker. So his thing is if he can get him off his spot, and I really like what I saw out of him in the run game this week. There's a couple of plays where he just blew up the interior of the offensive line and would have had a tackle for loss in a live game. And then Ole Miss, Walter Nolan was another one of these. I'd say he's probably the second best D tackle here this week. 6'3", 293. Made his presence known. People were saying this guy's probably going to be an Eagle somehow. He's just going to last to the end of the first round, and he would be an absolute monster. And I think Walter Nolan is one of those guys. I don't know if Washington would go D tackle. I'm going to talk about this here in a second. I don't know if they would go D tackle in the first round. But I will say, so that's my 3 D tackles. So here's my little nugget. I talked to an NFL insider day 2 of practice, someone that I've kind of come in and talked to the last few years now here at the Senior Bowl. And I don't go out of my way, but and by the way, it is so nice being here and not having to worry about coaches, hiring coaches, or, I just remember last year, the buzz and, trying to figure out who we were hiring and the whole Adam Peters thing is crazy. It's just nice to be able to focus on football this year. Then Adam Peters was here. Lance Newmark was here. A ton. I think I counted about 12 Washington Commander scouts were here day 1, day 2. Not sure how many were here yesterday for day 3, but everyone was here. Hands were, notes going at it. I loved watching the whole process. They were focusing, they were looking at talent. So it's nice that we could focus on football and not have to worry about off the field, like hirings and stuff like that. But I talked to this insider and I said, hey, because there's a couple articles that have come out already. I was like, I saw this and I just want to get your opinion. What are the chances that either Daron Payne or John Allen would get traded this offseason? And he said, I would be shocked. And he's like, I just don't see it happening. Like, one, it doesn't really make a ton of sense financially because, like, Washington has a ton of money. But 2, people, they're better than what people think. Like, Daron Payne and John Allen are better than what a lot of the fan base gives them credit for. But also, something that you have to think about, this made a ton of sense. Why would a team trade for, a premium pick for a Daron Payne or a John Allen if this is such a, just deep but also loaded defensive tackle draft. It doesn't make sense. Teams aren't going to want to give away a premium position. And it's, like I said in the beginning of this clip, it is universally known that this isn't the best, like, mind-blowing draft of all time. But still, if you can draft a guy, a lot of the stealings on these D tackles, I only mentioned 3. I could have named like 6 or 7 D tackles here this week that really impressed me. I mean, guys, I didn't expect to have big weeks, and they went crazy. And this isn't the entire list of D tackles in the draft. Like, it's loaded. Edge and D tackle are loaded in this draft. You want to build in the trenches? This is your draft. So it just does not make sense to trade and then have to pay, a premium draft pick and a premium price tag for a player like John Allen, Dron Payne, and like, it just doesn't make sense. Just draft somebody if you're a team that needs a D tackle and they're stealing who knows what they could be. So it just made sense to me. I think there's going to be a shakeup on the line, but I think it comes on the edges. I think the edge that gets the biggest makeover. And I'm going to talk all about that. I have a giant content schedule already planned for y'all, so don't worry. But it just does not make sense. It would have to be something that blows the socks off the team, especially in John Allen. John Allen's the only one that would really save you money, but he said, the team loves John Allen. Washington thinks super high of John Allen, so he just does not see it being a thing. He said, I would be shocked if Dron Payne or John Allen got traded. And honestly, I would too. Maybe at first I was thinking, I think I could see it, but now, like, really thinking about it, I don't see a way that either of them gets traded. It just doesn't make sense. And I don't see why a team would trade a pick that's worth actually trading them for on Washington's side as well. So that's my thoughts on the D tackle. That's a little nugget I heard this week. Just got his opinion on it. I was like, hey, what do you think? You don't know if you don't ask, right? And linebacker, I put 3 guys down. I didn't do a ton of studying with them. We're kind of waiting to see what Bobby Wagner does. I think he comes back for one more year. And I think we get a healthy year of Jordan McGee as a backup, but maybe they add a linebacker later on. But I will say 3 guys impressed me this week. Notre Dame's Jack Kaiser, Auburn's Eugene Asante, and Minnesota's Cody Lindenberg looked really good. Jack Kaiser had 2 interceptions. Cody Lindenberg had a lot of big plays as well. And Eugene Asante at 6 foot 222 was fast. Really fast. So nothing too crazy on the linebackers, but I know a couple people asked about that, so I wanted to give my thoughts on that as well. Offensive tackles. This is one that a lot of people wanted to hear about, so buckle up. There was 2 that I really, really liked. One I've talked about a couple times. That's Ariante Ursary out of Minnesota, another just giant human being, 6'5", 339. Posted a clip on him day one, just showing his pass protection. Talked with him. He said he had a really good meeting with Washington too. And the one thing of him, like, con-wise, is sometimes the speed guys can get past him on the outside, but when he gets a hand on them first, it's a wrap. Like, it doesn't matter if you gave him 10 seconds. They're not getting past Ariante. Like, he's just way too strong. And I saw a couple mock drafts talking about offensive tackle there in the first round for Washington. One of them, a month ago, had Ariante Ursary. I think he would be there in the second round, to be honest with you, just based off of other offensive tackles in this draft. So I would not be mad at all if that was the draft pick in the second round, if they decided to go Ariante Ursary, 6'5", 339, left tackle. Maybe they put Coleman at guard. Maybe they put Coleman at right tackle. Who knows? But Washington will absolutely be aggressive in building the trenches on both sides of the ball. Something else that I came away with this week, just talking to people, draft people, insider people as well. In my opinion, the guy who had the best week was Anthony Belton out of NC State. This is a guy I remember from the last draft cycle last year, but he decided to come back. He was a late round guy last year. Not that he was bad, but his consistency was something he needed to work on. But this week, he was, in my opinion, the best offensive tackle, and a lot of people agree with me. 6'5", 345. He was shutting down some of the best edge rushers this week. He looked really good in his technique. Everyone was saying the same thing, like PFF, all of the draft heads were like, if he can just stay consistent and do that every single game, he's a starting left tackle in this league. I think he could play right tackle too, but mostly left tackle. Josh Connolly Jr. out of Oregon, one of the guys that had the most buzz coming in here as a first round talent. 6'4", 313. He had a really good week. I know he got blown up by Mike Green in that viral video, but if you take that rep away, Josh Connolly Jr. had a good week. Really solid. I like him. Once again, maybe he's a guy that they would consider in the first round. I don't think he gets out of the first round. There's a lot of movement still, but as of today, I don't think he would make it out of the first round. I think he'd be somewhere between 25 and 32, if I had to guess. I would put him somewhere around that range. So if Washington wants to go left tackle in the first round, that'd be a guy that they would consider. And he played right tackle too this week. And then Marcus Mbow is a guy that got a lot of hype here too. 6'4", 309. I thought he had a solid week, but I was expecting more out of him. But I still think he's a really good tackle. I would probably take him in the second. I don't think I would have him in the first. And then offensive line, the interior offensive line, this is where a lot of guys surprised me. This is one where I didn't have a lot of notes going into it. And I was just like straight up, let me see who blows me away this week. And Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State. They are just producing offensive linemen every single year between like Quinn Miners, Cody Baugh out of North Dakota State. It seems like every single year you get these small school offensive linemen here that go to the Senior Bowl, they dominate against really good talent, and then they end up being really good players in the league. Like I said, Quinn just got paid big time. Cody Ball, big time part of the Bucs offensive line. Gray Zabel's that next guy, 6'5", 316. He was, he was shutting everything down, the best of the best. I think he was a top 5 overall player here this week. That's another thing too. You'll hear me say it a lot, but you also heard it a lot this week too. Is, this guy played himself into the first round. This guy played himself into the first round. Somebody in that first round is not going to make it to 29. But all of these, and it's like I said, shifting around and stuff like that, there's going to be somebody that falls to Washington at 29. I know it seems like it's so far away. We're so far back of the line when it comes to the draft. But there's going to be a good talent that is there because of, maybe some teams get crazy at quarterback. Maybe some teams, decide to reach on a certain player because the position's pretty top heavy. You will see somebody with a really good talent fall there at 29, whether it's edge, whether it's a corner, whether it's an offensive tackle. But there is some good talent in this draft. But is it as good as in other drafts? Probably not. Miami's Jalen Rivers is another guy that stood out to me too. Played guard a lot this week. Jackson State Clay Webb, 6'3", 310, 5-star recruit. Played really well this week once again. Talked to him for a good bit at the media session. He played center and he played guard. Carson Vincent, the one HBCU guy here. Shout out to Carson. I love his personality. I love his mentality. 6'6", 314. Alabama A&M. Shout out to HBCU representing here at the Senior Bowl, and he held it down. He had one of the best weeks too within the interior line. So that's what I'm saying. You get guys from North Dakota State, Jackson State, Alabama A&M coming here just dominating some of these SEC guys, Big Ten, ACC, whatever, and they looked really good. Carson Vincent, maybe one of these late day 2, probably more so early day 3 guys if we decided to beef up the guard, whether it's as a backup or someone that could plug in at right guard, which I will talk about soon, by the way, even more in depth about the whole Sam Cosmi situation. But man, we had some really good interior offensive linemen. I want to talk about 2 teammates. Miles Frazier was also one of the best offensive linemen here, 6'5", 324. There's a lot of clips of him shutting down the best edge rushers here, especially from that right guard spot. And then Emory Jones from LSU, his teammate, was one of those weird ones this week. I think he had some good reps at right tackle. He had some bad reps too, but it just seemed like, and it's not just me, a move to guard would be best for him. 6'4", 312. I just think he would be more comfortable there. I think his upside's better at that right guard position. And once again, maybe that's a guy that they decide to go in the second round. But I think he has to move to guard. That's just me. Other people thought so too, but I just don't see him staying at that right tackle spot. Now let's get to some skill position players. Y'all want to hear about some skill position players? Me too. I got running backs, tight ends, and wide receivers. Let's go running backs first. Um, I'd say 3 really stood out to me, and then 1 kind of stood out to me. So the 3 that stood out to me the most, Kansas's Devin Neal, no surprise, 5'10", 220, really complete back. One of the more productive, running backs as a complete back, receiving game, running game as well, and then also pass protection. I really liked what I saw out of Devin Neal. I think he would really fit this offense well. One thing that Washington really has to decide is if they want to go more gap heavy schemes, more zone schemes, or if they want to keep mixing it up. Because in the second half of the season, kind of transitioned or was pretty even. Like we started out pretty gap heavy and then went to gap with some zone. But Cliff just needs to figure out. Same with Anthony Lynn. They just need to figure out what kind of like run scheme they want moving forward, and then you have to build the trenches, of course. But we need a running back one. Of course, Marion Hampton, Caleb Johnson, all those guys that aren't here or in big play. Travion Henderson. Like I said, I'm going to break down running backs and individual players as we get closer to the draft. But Devin Neal was one guy that I really like this week. I would love him on my team. And a lot of people said that this week too. They would love to have a Devin Neal that can do a little bit of everything. Trevor Etienne surprised me. 5'8", 202. I didn't think he was that short, but he looked really good. I really appreciated the routes that he ran this week. I loved his pass protection. I loved his grittiness, his contact balance. Trevor Etienne looked really good this week. Like I was really surprised. He looked good. And then one of my other favorite running backs, who I think would be a really, really good value, probably late day 2. Gosh, just such a loaded running back class. You just have no idea where these guys are going to go. He could be there day 3. This is a guy that was considered one of the best running backs coming into this year, and that is Miami's Damian Martinez. I think he actually had a good year too. Watched the bowl game at the end of the season. He played well. 5'11", 226. Another one of those guys that can do it all. He can catch, he can run, he can block for you. I liked his size. I liked his decisiveness here this week at the Senior Bowl. Obviously, you're not doing but so much runs. You're only, they were still tackling and stuff, but it's not as intense. So it's kind of hard to see. But, but watching those one-on-one drills, watching him in pass protection, pick up a blitzer, whether it's a linebacker or somebody that got through the line, I really like Damian Martinez. And then another guy that I thought looked really solid this week that had a bad season was Oklahoma State's Ollie Gordon. And 6'1", 233. He looked the part, big frame, big dude. I really like his game. I think in the right fit, he can get back. I forgot who it was. Somebody asked if he prefers more of a gap or a zone offense, and he said he prefers a gap offense so he can just hit that hole and go. And like I said, Washington ran a good bit of gap last year, so I think Ollie Gordon would be a good fit for the team if they decide to keep going with that gap-heavy run scheme. Now, tight ends. This one's interesting because not long ago, locker clean out and everything, Zach Ertz said he's not retiring. So it's pretty much up to Washington. Are they going to sign him to a 1-year deal, which I think they should. But still, next season, it's only him and Ben that would be under contract. I just don't know what they're going to do with Bates. He's a free agent, so maybe they decide, hey, we need another tight end. This is a guy that might not produce a ton next year. Like I said, I expect to jump out of Ben Sinnott next year. But maybe this guy that they draft, this year can end up being the tight end one, or they don't bring back Zach Ertz. But I don't see why they don't bring Zach Ertz back because he was a big part of the season. He was a big safety blanket for Jaden Daniels, and they have a great connection. He made a lot of big plays. So if he's not retiring, you might as well bring him back for 1 more year on a vet-friendly deal. But I don't think that would stop them from drafting a tight end. Would it stop them from drafting like a Harold Fannin Jr., 6'3", 238? Probably, because I think he goes pretty high. I think he goes in the second round. But then you have some other of these guys, 2 other guys that might be late day 2s. One's not playing. He was at the airport earlier today, Mason Taylor out of LSU. So Jaden Daniels' old teammate. I know their connection very well because they beat Alabama together on that scoring touchdown, 6'4", 250. I thought Mason Taylor was a guy that stacked days, just really good days on top of each other all week long. And his dad's in good shape too. I think he could still play. He was here. Shout out to Jason Taylor. But I think Mason could be one of those late day 2 guys, maybe even like round 3. the tight end class is really good too. It's loaded. So like I said, it's not even just the guys that aren't here at the Senior Bowl that could be, top 100 picks. But I think that's something to keep an eye on, what they decide to do with Zach Ertz. But I think as of today, I think they would sign him. Might as well sign him for one more year. But if you can draft a guy that could produce, next season, or the season after, why not? If you're getting a good value on a guy, nothing's really guaranteed next season. If you lose Zach Ertz next season, and the free agent for tight ends is not good this season either. So, will they draft a tight end? I don't know. Will they draft one like the first 2 rounds? Maybe not. Unless they decide to move on from Zach Ertz, but I would be shocked. And then Miami's Elijah Arroyo was insane this week. Probably the best route runner, the best – I want to say best catch. Well, yeah, he was pretty much the best catcher too. He did everything really well. They all 3 killed it, honestly. He's 6'4", 251. He is so fast. I think I saw something where he ran like 22 miles an hour here at the Senior Bowl, or maybe it was like this season. But they said only 5 ball carriers in the NFL ran faster than he did this season, which is just nuts for a tight end. And he's 251. It's not like he's 238 like Harold Fandon Jr. Just Elijah can move. That boy can scoot. So he looked really good. He was a lot of people's favorites here this week. So that's something I'm really going to dissect and break down as we get a little bit closer to free agency, is what Washington's going to do with the tight ends. But are they going to bring back Bates? Are they going to bring back Zach Ertz? If not, you only got Ben. That's it. The room gets lonely after that. And then, like I said, last 2, wide receiver, and I got a kicker for y'all. So stay tuned for all the kicker fans out there, because a lot of people were asking about it. And I appreciate everyone that was commenting, asking questions, hit me up on Twitter. Really hard to keep up with everything. It's intense down here. It's a very overwhelming week, but it's a ton of fun. And I just want to give you all as much content as I can. So this isn't the only thing you'll hear from the Senior Bowl and all these players. Like I said, if you have questions, drop it in the comments. And I'm going to do a live stream Sunday night, just catching up with everybody. So come through on that. Haven't decided a time and everything yet, but I will post it as soon as possible. So wide receivers, my favorite guy so far this draft. And y'all saw me posting clips of him, my interview with him, talking about him a lot. Kyle Williams out of Washington State. And I told this guy, by the way, he's right at like 5'10", 5'11", 185. Had 70 catches for 1,198 yards and 14 touchdowns. I told him. So first 2 days of practice, I was like, this guy looks really good, running good routes, had good hands, like he was showing a separation. I was a big fan. And then we had our media event after the second practice, and I saw him sitting there. I was like, bro, I'm going to be honest. I had no idea of anything about you coming into here, but you were my favorite guy the first 2 days. And he was like, that's why I came here, to turn heads and let people know who I am. It's like, that's what I wanted to do. So I love his mentality. I went back, as exhausted as I was, went back and watched like 2.5 games of him before I fell asleep. I watched the was it Oregon State game and the New Mexico game from this past season where he had 3 touchdowns. And I was like, man, and even after practice yesterday, just talking to him, I was like, dude, you would fit this offense so well. He would be such a De'Ami Brown replacement. And even if De'Ami Brown came back, he would fit this offense just ridiculously with the screens, with those 10 to 19 yard throws that Jaden was excellent at, just getting the ball in his hands and letting him show off his speed. Daniel Jeremiah put out an article, and I shared a little clip of it on Twitter. Said he was one of the most impressive players. This is one of the guys that helped him out this week. So check that out. I posted it on Twitter, just a little clip of it. But he said, I knew his speed was good, but I was so impressed with his releases in his hands. He was catching everything. So Kyle Williams, like I said, didn't know anything about him. I'm a big fan. I posted a short part of the clip where I interviewed him and asked him about Washington, and he said, he was smiling. He's like, we had a really good connection. Me and the guy talked for a hot minute, but he said we definitely have a really good connection. And he said, hey, as a Cali boy, I would love to play with Jaden Daniels. He spoke really high of Jaden, as of course everyone is. But I just think like fit wise and personality, just everything. So Kyle Williams is my Ben Sinnott of this year. I think we draft Kyle Williams. Like I said, I'm going to get more in depth about the wide receivers, free agency, draft, and all that, but I don't see a top wide receiver being there for Washington in the first. And I just think the value is going to be more so trenches, maybe even corner in those first 2 rounds. D tackle, D end, offensive tackle, corner. I think that's the more important, not even just importance, but just the value there, because we need help at wide receivers. We do. We only have 2 that aren't free agents next year coming up, Jaden and Luke McCaffrey. I mean, Terry and Luke McCaffrey. But I just think the value is going to be there for edge, D tackle, corner, some of those big positions in those first 2 rounds. I just don't see them going after a wide receiver and just hoping for the best. But as of right now, Kyle Williams is the guy I am stamping to being a Washington Commander. So I will be riding the Kyle Williams train the rest of the draft season. I'll do a full breakdown, film, all that stuff about him soon. Don't worry. Utah State, Jalen Royal is another guy that a lot of people are talking about. 5'11", 210, really stout. He's a really good player. I loved how he looked this week. I was expecting a little bit more out of him, but like going back and watching it, the quarterback play was just so bad. Like, it was bad. Like, I went back and watched his routes and how he plays for his size and everything, and I was impressed. I knew he was a good player coming in here because I've had to scout him twice this season for Utah State, and I knew he was a good ball player. Didn't get to finish the season though. So that's something I asked him, like, hey, you know, season was cut short. You like, what did you want to show here? And he just kind of said, like, I want to finish the season how I wanted to, like, show them what I can do here, not like how the season actually finished up. So just really good mentality. Great release package for his size. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Malachi Corley from last season, just like a little bit, especially like the yak ability and everything, and just like the shorter, like stout, heftier size, but still really good, you know, acceleration and quickness. Kind of reminds me of that. And then 3 more wide receivers to round it out. Jack Betch out of TCU. I know I posted something about him. Washington fans hated me. They said no more wide receivers, no wide receivers out of TCU. But I'm telling y'all, this guy was the best wide receiver here this week. Like, it's not even close. I think he was the best wide receiver to a lot of people. 6'1", 214. He catches everything. He gets separation. He runs routes. Super productive this year. 62 catches, over 1,000 yards, and 9 touchdowns. The film's good, and he looked good here. Don't overthink it. Every year, it seems like there's one of those, like, you know, random guys. I don't want to say just like random white guys, but just kind of random wide receivers that take off, like the Puka Nacua, Lad McConkey, you know, just because he went to Georgia, people knew who he was, but just guys who look good at the Senior Bowl. And you're like, as much as I want to not like him, it's impossible. He is extremely likable guy, and he's really good. I don't care if you went to TCU. We got to get over this whole helmet scouting thing. It doesn't exist. That's not a real thing. He straight up is a really good ball player. And if it's not Washington, someone's going to draft a really good wide receiver. Then another one of my favorites was Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State. Really tall, 6'3", 217, just a lengthy guy. But his footwork and his release and his routes are so clean for his size. Like, he runs routes like he's 5'10", like 185. Like, he doesn't look his size at all when you just like focus on his feet and how he gets separation and how he runs. That would be one of the guys I would be cool with taking in the 2nd round if he's there. That would be one of the exceptions where I'm like, okay, I'm not mad at that pick. If it's not Kyle Williams, okay, take Jaden Higgins. But he looked really good this week too. Like I said, quarterback play sucked. And then, of course, one of the biggest talks of the town was 5'9", 156. Yes, those were his real measurements. Tez Johnson out of Oregon. Fast. Separation through the charts. He can separate from anything. He could separate from super glue. And, of course, there's going to be talk about his weight. But he plays so well. I think Matt Miller said it earlier. He said it's crazy when a guy like just looks so good. His performance is so good at the Senior Bowl throughout the whole week that people forget that he measured in at 5'9", 156. Like, you just completely forget about that. So, of course, you can have, like, durability concerns and stuff like that, like with his size and everything. But the dude can straight out ball. And he is as good as a person as anyone here. A-plus attitude, A-plus personality. And then rounding it out, Florida State's kicker, Ryan Fitzgerald, 5'10", 195, is worthy of a draft pick. People are going to hate that. But if you want a long-term kicker who is reliable, who could be that franchise guy for a long time, and you want to spend a later round pick on him, maybe like 5th round, you probably would have to. Late 5th, I wouldn't mind it. Ryan Fitzgerald's your guy. The last 2 seasons, he was 72 for 72 in extra points. He was 32 for 34 in field goals. He was 5 for 5 in 50-plus field goals and has a career long of 59 yards. He's Mr. Reliable. He looked really good this week too, watching all the kicks. They ended the last practice. Literally every player, not just his team, like every player on that team, offensive defense, was around him doing the tomahawk chant, like yelling, getting him like nervous and stuff like that. And he nailed a 51, 52 yarder probably. It was like right at the 40. It was like a 50-yard field goal. Nailed it. Ease. That's his bread and butter. That's 50 plus. Like I said, 5 for 5 the last 2 years. Only missed 2 kicks the last 2 years though. And I want to say one was like 40s, like mid 40s, and one was like low 40s. But hasn't missed an extra point the last 2 seasons. This is actually a really good kicker draft group as well. There's a couple others I'll talk about. It's not the sexiest thing to talk about, but as we know in Washington, we do need that long-term guy. Absolutely need that long-term kicker. No more of these crazy kicks and stressful things. Ryan Fitzgerald should be the very top of your draft board when it comes to kickers. So quick recap as I end the stream here. My favorite, I'll just name my favorite Washington fit guys. Corner, I'll say Maxwell Harrison. Edge, Josiah Stewart. D tackle, I'd spend a day 2 draft pick on Darius Alexander. Absolutely. Linebacker, Jack Kaiser. Offensive tackle is tough. I'm going to go Arion Terrestry. Interior offensive line, I'm going to go Miles Frazier out of LSU. If he ended up being our right guard, I think we would be set for the year if they decide to draft instead of go with free agency. Running back, oh, this is tough. I'm stuck between Damian Martinez and Devin Neal. I'm going to go Devin Neal, though. I think the upside's a little bit better. I just like his explosiveness a lot. Tight end, I'm going to go Mason Taylor. I love the connection with Jaden Daniels. I like what I saw of him today. Even when someone was draped over him, he was still catching everything. So I'm going to go Mason Taylor. Wide receiver, give me my guy Kyle Williams. Start the hype train. I love him. Good dude. I'm going to keep in touch with him or his agent throughout this process. And then kicker Ryan Fitzgerald. So that's something y'all are going to get out of me. Like I said, I've probably connected with about 10 to 12 agents while I'm here. It's my favorite thing to do. I'm going to try to get on as many draft prospects. Some agents don't like draft prospects going on to shows and talking and stuff like that. But I'm not going to ask like clickbaity stuff. Like, so you have off the field issues, like what happened last season with this? Like, was your quarterback like terrible last year? Like, what happened? That's not me. So I'm going to try to get like some of these guys on here to do interviews and stuff like that. But I'm going to stay in touch with their agents throughout the whole draft process. I told them, hey, let me know if you hear anything from Washington, like top 30 visits, if you're like any kind of meetings, anything like that. Same with the combine. Haven't decided if I'm going to go to the combine yet. Never been. But I'm kind of thinking about it. We'll see. Haven't decided yet. We'll see. But nonetheless, I told them, keep in touch with me. Just let me know what's going on through the process. Anything comes up with Washington, let me know. So I've been building connections all week while I'm here, watching these players. Like I said, y'all, this offseason is going to be insane. It's going to be my busiest offseason ever. Like, you're going to see me pretty much every day. So hit that subscribe button, hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Hope you did. Hope you got something out of it. I know it wasn't too in depth, like stats and like what's his wingspan, stuff like that, but it's coming. It's definitely coming. But there's just a lot. So I wanted to try to keep this under an hour because I could literally talk about a lot of these guys for a long time. Nonetheless, I thought it was a good week. I thought a lot of players, did what they came here to do. I wanted some out of some other ones. We'll see what happens in the game. Like I said, I expect some of the players to not play. There's already some guys like Mason Taylor who pulled out of the game just for, they don't want to get hurt or anything like that. They're getting ready for training for the combine and the draft. So follow along. Buckle up, guys. It's going to be a long off season, but hopefully you all enjoyed. It's always a good time here. Appreciate it. See y'all next time.